This video is about thermoregulation. Thermoregulation is a process that allows your body to maintain its core potential internal temperature. All thermoregulation mechanisms are designed to return your body to homeostasis. This is a state of equilibrium. A healthy internal body temperature falls within a narrow window. Introduction. Homeothermic, warm-blooded humans capable of maintaining their body temperatures within narrow limits in spite of wide variations in environment. Ambient temperature. Poikilothermic, cold-blooded fish, reptiles, then neutral zone temperature, comfortable temperature, critical ambient temperature at which there is no active heat loss and heat gain mechanism operated by body. So it is lowest ambient temperature at which mammals can maintain its body temperature at the basal metabolic rate. Normally it is 27 plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius. Living tissues can function optimally only within a very narrow range of temperature. Therefore, accurate regulation of body temperature is a great boon. It enables the animal to be physically active all around the year and in different geographical locations. A normal thermoregulation. Thermoregulation uses negative feedback to minimize perturbations from present values. Many researchers shows that normal thermoregulation is present based on multiple redundant signals from a very single tissue type. The process of thermoregulatory information occurs in three phases: afferent thermal sensing, central regulation, and efferent response. First, afferent thermal sensing. Peripheral skin cold receptors CMR1 via A delta and C fibers fire extreme maximally at 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Skin warm receptors PR1 via C fibers fire maximally at 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. Then central receptors in spinal cord afferents travel lateral spinothalamic tracts to medulla to hypothalamus. A normal thermoregulation. Normal thermoregulation. Thermoregulation uses negative feedback to minimize perturbations from present values. Many researchers show the normal thermoregulation is based on multiple redundant signals from every tissue type. The processing of thermoregulatory information occurs in three phases, which are the afferent thermal sensing, central regulation, and efferent responses. First one, afferent thermal sensing. We just learned this. Skin cold receptors CMR1 via A delta and C fibers fire maximally at 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Skin warm receptors VR1 via C fibers fire maximally at 45 to 50 degrees C. Central receptors in spinal cord afferents travel lateral spinothalamic tracts to medulla to hypothalamus. Then central regulation, anterior hypothalamus cooling effect, sensitive to heat or warm blood affects cooling. Posterior hypothalamus warming effect, sensitive to cold afferent from posterior peripheral receptors affecting warming. And then efferent system effect peripheral skin, sweat glands, muscle shivering, thermogenesis, brown fat muscle, non-shivering thermogenesis, central cerebrum, behavioral changes. Then hyperthermia and hypothermia. You have said to have severe hyperthermia if your body temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius. By comparison, a body temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 35 degrees Celsius or lower, is considered hypothermic. The average body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. And hyperthermia response. Peripheral skin vasodilation, increase in cutaneous blood flow via arteriovenous shunts, increase radiation, convection, conduction, sweat glands, increase sweating, increase evaporation, shivering and non-shivering, thermogenesis inhibited, and central cerebellum, behavioral changes, lethargy, decreased metabolic rate, increased fluid intake, then fanning, removing excessive clothing, then looking for shade. And hypothermic response, hypo in the sense temperature low. So peripheral skin vasoconstriction, decrease cutaneous blood flow via arteriovenous shunts, decrease radiation, conduction, sweat glands secrete sweating, minimize evaporation, shivering, uncoordinated large muscle group contraction, metabolic heat generated from mechanical work, non-shivering thermogenesis, oxidative phosphorylation in brown fat and muscle, activated by beta-3 sympathetic activity, metabolic heat production without mechanical work. And hypothermic response, central cerebrum, behavioral changes, Wearing extra clothes, increasing physical activity, seeking heat, consuming hot drinks. Central. Cerebrum, behavioral changes, wearing extra clothes, increasing physical activity, seeking heat, consuming hot drinks. Thermal balance, muscular activity, environmental heat, radiation, conduction, convection, evaporation, heat loss, body heat content. Why regulation of body temperature is required? The enzyme of our bodies work in an optimal temperature. Speed of chemical reaction varies with temperature. Very low temperature leads to cardiac fibrillation and failure. Lower lethal core temperature is 26 degrees Celsius. Very high temperature lead to heat stroke. Upper lethal core temperature is 43.5 degrees Celsius. Temperature of the extremes close to the body core temperature. Sweat evaporation, vascular dilation. Muscular constriction, falling temperature on feet and hands, muscle contraction, cold, shivering. And temperature degrees Celsius with consequences. 40 to 44, heat stroke with multiple organ failure and brain lesions. Hypothermia as a result of fever or exercise. 36 to 38, normal range. 34 to 36, mild hypothermia. 30 to 34, impairment of temperature regulation. 27 to 29, cardiac fibrillation. An effective variation in normal body temperature. Body temperature falls, blood vessels constrict so that heat is conserved, sweat glands do not secrete fluid, shivering and involuntary contraction of muscles generates heat which warms the body, heat is retained, normal body temperature rises, blood vessels dilate resulting in heat loss to environment, sweat glands secrete fluid, as the fluid evaporates, heat is lost from the body, heat is lost to the environment. Then factors affecting body temperature: age, exercise, hormonal level, stress, circadian rhythm, environment. So factors affecting body temperature: age, infants and persons with greater than 75 years have trouble regulating body temperature. Diurnal variations, circadian rhythms, exercise or hard work can increase temperature to 38.3 or to 40 degrees Celsius. Then hormones, ovulation, stress, sympathetic nerve system stimulation, environment, extremes in temperature, disease process, like that. Then heat production, voluntary exercise, 70 to 80% energy expenditure appears as heat. And involuntary shivering, increase heat production by plus or minus 5 times. Action of hormones, thyroxine, catecholamines, called non-shivering thermogenesis. Heat loss, radiation, heat loss from exposed skin or parts of the body. Evaporation, heat loss when the body loses water due to evaporation. Sweat. Convection, heat loss from wind displacing a layer of warm air near the skin. Conduction, heat loss through contact with a cooler object. Cold flows. Then respiration, heat loss from inhaling and exhaling colder air. Heat loss, radiation, transfer of heat via infrared rays. No physical contact between surfaces, 60% heat loss at rest. Radiation, transfer of heat via infrared rays, no physical contact between surfaces, 60% heat loss at rest. Conduction, heat loss due to contact with another surface. Heat loss, form of convection, form of conductive heat loss, heat transfer to air or water. Evaporation, heat transferred via water. Sweat on skin surface, evaporation rate depends on temperature and relative humidity. Conductor currents around the body, around the skin surface exposed, 25% heat loss at rest. Most important means during exercise. Heat exchange during exercise, skin thermal radiation, evaporation, sweat, skin blood convection, metabolic storage, contracting muscle conduction, radiation, muscle blood flow convection, work, then convection, evaporation, respiratory, solar radiation, air temperature, air humidity, ground thermal radiation, reflecting solar radiation, running speed. Homeostasis and temperature control. Nerve system. Body temperature rises above normal. Nerve system signals dermal body blood vessels to dilate and sweat glands to secrete. Then body heat is lost to its surroundings. Body temperature drops towards normal. normal body temperature. Then body temperature drops below normal. Nervous system signals dermal blood vessels to constrict and sweat glands to remain inactive. If body temperature continues to drop, nervous system signals muscles to contract involuntarily. Muscle activity generates body heat. Body heat is conserved. Then body temperature rises toward normal. Next topic, normal body temperature and thermal comfort zone. Normal body temperature, body core temperature and skin temperature. The temperature of deep tissues of the body. The core of the body remains very constant within plus or minus 1 degree Fahrenheit, except when a person develops a bad illness. Indeed, a new person can be exposed to temperatures as low as 55 degrees Fahrenheit or as high as 130 degree Fahrenheit in dry air and still maintain an almost constant core temperature. The skin temperature, in contrast to the core temperature, rises and falls with the temperature of the surroundings. Normal core temperature, not single core temperature can be considered normal because measurements in many healthy people have shown a range of normal temperatures measured oddly from less than 97 degrees Celsius, 36 degrees Celsius to over 37.5 degrees Celsius. The average normal core temperature is generally considered to be between 38.0 degree Fahrenheit and 38.6 degree Fahrenheit when measured orally and about 1 degree Fahrenheit higher when measured rectally. Body temperature is controlled by balancing heat production and heat loss. And the rate of heat production in the body is greater than the rate at which heat is being lost. Heat builds up in the body and body temperature rises. Conversely, when heat loss is greater, both body heat and body temperature decrease. Rate of heat production in the body, rate at which heat is being lost, body temperature rises. So heat production is a principal byproduct of metabolism. Factors affecting the rate of heat production called the metabolic rate of the body. Basal rate of metabolism of all the cells of the body. Extra rate of metabolism caused by muscle activity, including muscle contractions caused by shivering. Extra metabolism caused by the effect of thyroxine, and to a less extent other hormones such as growth hormone and testosterone in the cells. On the cells, and extra metabolism caused by the effect of epinephrine, norepinephrine and sympathetic stimulation on the cells. Extra metabolism caused by increased chemical activity in the cells themselves, especially when the cell temperature increases. Extra metabolism needs for digestion, absorption and storage of food. Thermogenic effect of food. Heat loss. Most of the heat produced in the body is generated in the deep organs, especially in the liver, brain and heart and in the skeletal muscles during exercise. Then this heat is transferred from the deeper organs and tissues to the skin. There is where it is lost to the air and other surroundings. Therefore, the rate at which heat is lost is determined almost entirely by two factors: how rapidly heat can be conducted from where it is produced in the body core to the skin, how rapidly heat can then be transferred from the skin to the surroundings. An insulator system of the body, the skin, the subcutaneous tissues and especially the fat of the subcutaneous tissues act together as a heat insulator for the body. Then insulation beneath the skin is an effective means of maintaining normal internal core temperature, even though it allows the temperature of the skin to approach the temperature of surroundings. Then blood flow to the skin from body core provide heat transfer. The skin is an effective controlled heat radiator system, and the flow of blood in the skin is a most effective mechanism for heat transfer from the body core to the skin. Blood vessels are distinguished profoundly beneath the skin. Especially important in a continuous venous plexus is the supply of inflow of blood from the skin capillaries. In the most exposed areas of body, the hands, feet and ears, blood is also supplied to the plexus directly from the small arteries to highly vascular venous anastomosis. A high rate of skin flow causes heat to be conducted from the core of the body to the skin with great efficiency, whereas a reduction in the rate of skin flow can decrease the heat conduction from the core to a very little. Control of heat conduction to the skin by the sympathetic nervous system. Heat conduction to the The skin by the body is controlled by the degree of vasoconstriction of the arterioles and the arteriovenous anastomosis that supply blood to the venous plexus of the skin. This vasoconstriction is controlled almost entirely by the sympathetic nerve system in response to changes in body core temperature and changes in environmental temperature. How heat is lost from the skin surface. False evaporation, radiation 60%, heat waves, conduction into air currents, convection, conduction to objects. The various methods by which heat is lost from the skin to surroundings are called radiation, conduction and evaporation. Radiation. In any person sitting inside at normal room temperature, about 60% of total heat loss is by radiation. Loss of heat by radiation means loss in the form of infrared heat rays. Then the human body radiates heat rays in all directions. Heat rays are also being radiated from the walls of rooms and objects towards the body. If the temperature of the body is greater than the temperature of the surroundings, a greater quantity of heat is radiated from the body than it's radiated to the body. Only minute quantities of heat, around 3%, are normally lost from the body by direct conduction from the surface of the body to solid objects such as a chair or a bed. Loss of heat by conduction to air, however, represents a sizable proportion of the body's heat loss, about 50%. Even after normal conditions, conduction of heat from body to the air is self-limited unless the heated air moves away from the skin. So, new unheated air is continuously brought in contact with the skin, a phenomenon called air convection. So, air convection, a removal of heat from a body by convection air currents, is commonly called the heat loss by convection. Actually, the heat must first be conducted to the air and then carried away by the convection air currents. Cooling effect of wind. When the body is exposed to wind, a layer of air immediately adjacent to the skin is replaced by new air much more rapidly than normally, and heat loss by convection increases accordingly. The cooling effect of wind at low velocities is about proportional to the square root of the wind velocity. So, conduction and convection of heat by a person suspended in water. Water has a specific heat several thousand times as heat as that of air. So, each unit portion of water adjacent to the skin can absorb far greater quantities of heat than air can. Also, heat conductivity in water is very great in comparison with that in air. Consequently, it is impossible for body to heat a thin layer of water next to the body to form an insulator zone that occurs in air. Therefore, the rate of heat loss to water is usually many times greater than the rate of heat loss to air. An effect of clothing on conductive heat loss. Clothing entraps air next to the skin in the wave of a cloth, severely increasing the thickness of the so-called private zone of air adjacent to the skin, and also decreasing the flow of convection air currents. Consequently, the rate of heat loss from the body by conduction and convection is greatly depressed. And evaporation. When water evaporates from the body surface, 0.58 kilocalorie of heat is lost for each gram of water that evaporates. Even when a person is not sweating, water still evaporates intensively from the skin and lungs at the rate of about 600 to 700 ml per day. This causes continuous heat loss at a rate of 16 to 19 calories per hour. This insatiable evaporation through the skin and lungs cannot be controlled for the purposes of temperature regulation because it results from continual diffusion of water molecules through the skin and respiratory surfaces. As long as skin temperature is greater than the temperature of the surroundings, heat can be lost by radiation and conduction. But when the temperature of the surroundings become greater than that of the skin, instead of losing heat, the body gains heat by both radiation and conduction. Under these conditions, the only means by which the body can get rid of itself of heat is by evaporation. Then regulation of body temperature. The temperature of the body is regulated almost entirely by nerves feedback mechanism, and almost all these operate through temperature regulating centers located in the hypothalamus. For this feedback mechanism to operate, there must also be temperature detectors to determine when the body temperature become either too high or too low. Role of anterior hypothalamic preoptic area in thermostatic detection of temperature. The anterior preoptic area have a large number of heat sensitive neurons as well as about one-third as many cold sensitive neurons. These neurons are believed to function as temperature sensors for controlling body temperature. The heat sensitive neurons increase their firing rate 2 to 10-fold in response to a 10 degrees Celsius increase in body temperature. The cold sensitive neurons, by contrast, increase their firing rate when the body temperature falls. Then a detection of temperature by receptors in the skin and deep body tissues. Also, the receptors in other parts of the body, especially in the skin and a few specific deep tissues of the body, play additional roles in temperature regulation. And the skin is called chilled over the entire body. Immediate reflex effects are involved and begin to increase the temperature of the body in several ways by providing a strong stimulus to cause shivering with a resultant increase in the rate of body heat production by inhibiting the process of sweating, but it is already occurring by promoting skin vasoconstriction to diminish loss of body heat from the skin. Then posterior hypothalamus integrates the control and peripheral temperature sensory signals. Even though many temperature sensory signals arise in peripheral receptors, these signals contribute to the body temperature control maintained through hypothalamus. The area of hypothalamus that is stimulated is located bilaterally in the posterior hypothalamus, approximately at the level of mammillary bodies. The temperature sensory signals from the anterior hypothalamic preoptic area are also transmitted into its posterior hypothalamic area. Here the signals from the preoptic area and the signals from elsewhere in the body are combined and integrated to control the heat producing and heat conserving reactions of the body. Heat conserving reactions in the body. So, neuronal effector mechanism that decrease or increase body temperature. The hypothalamic temperature centers detect that the body temperature is either too high or too low. They institute appropriate temperature decreasing or temperature increasing procedures. And body is too hot, vasodilation of skin, blood vessels, sweating, decrease in heat production. And body is too cold, skin vasoconstriction throughout the body, piloerection, increase in thermogenesis. Abnormality of body temperature regulation. Fever, which means a body temperature above the usual range of normal, can be caused by abnormalities in the brain itself or by toxic substances that affect the temperature regulating centers. So, resetting the hypothalamic temperature regulating center in febrile disease. Many proteins break down products of proteins and carbs, certain other substances, especially lipopolysaccharide toxins released from bacterial cell membrane, can cause the set point of the hypothalamic thermostat to rise. Substances that cause this effect is called pyrogens. Pyrogens released from toxic bacteria or from those released from degenerating body tissues cause fever during disease conditions. When the set point of the hypothalamic temperature regulating center become higher than normal, all the mechanisms for raising the body temperature are brought into play, including heat conversion and increased heat production. Within a few hours after the set point has been increased, the body temperature also approaches this level. Antipyretics works by reducing prostaglandin synthesis within the hypothalamus. Synthesis of prostaglandins such as PGE2 require the enzyme cyclooxygenase. The substrate for cyclooxygenase is arachidonic acid. Antipyretic medications mostly are inhibitors of cyclooxygenase enzymes. Thermal comfort zone. The comfort zone is defined as the range of climatic conditions within which a majority of persons could feel thermal comfort. Thermal comfort is a condition of mind that expresses satisfaction with the thermal environment that is assessed by subjective evaluation. The human body can be viewed as a heat machine where food is the input energy. The human body will release excess heat into the environment so the body can continue to operate. The heat transfer is proportional to temperature difference. In cold environment, the body loses more heat to the environment, and in hot environment, the body does not release enough heat. So, models of thermal comfort. The predicted mean watt model stands among the most recognized thermal comfort model. It was developed using principles of heat balance and experimental data collected in a controlled climate chamber under steady state conditions. The adaptive model, on the other hand, was developed based on hundreds of field studies with the idea that occupants dynamically interact with their environment. Occupants control their thermal environment by means of clothing, operable windows, then fans, personal heaters, and sunshades. The PMV model can be applied to air conditioning buildings, while adaptive model can be applied only to buildings where no mechanical systems have been installed. Then influence factors. The thermal comfort temperature may vary greatly between individuals and depending on factors such as active level, clothing, and humidity. There are 6 primary factors that directly affect the thermal comfort that can be grouped in 2 categories. Personal factors, they are characteristics of the occupant and they are metabolic rate and clothing level. Environmental factors, which are conditions of the thermal environment, they are air temperature, mean radiant temperature, air speed, and humidity. Even if all these factors may vary in time, standards usually refer to a steady state to steady thermal comfort, just allowing limited temperature variations. Human heat loss factors, conduction, air temperature, radiation, air motion, relative humidity, radiation, evaporation, convection, and conduction. Significance. Satisfaction with the thermal environment is important because thermal conditions are potentially life-threatening for humans if the core body temperature reaches conditions of hyperthermia above 37.5 to 38.3 degrees Celsius or hypothermia below 35 degrees Celsius. Buildings modifying the conditions of external environment and reduce the effort that human body needs to do in order to stay stable at a normal human body temperature, important for the correct functioning of human physiological process. Several studies prove that thermal comfort can improve the quality of life and human health. Intellectual performance, physical and sense perception. Someone will reach the best condition when a man is in a comfortable condition of thermal. This means that activities related to such intellectual learning, work that require concentration and a drain of mind, creative work, and others may do well if a person in a comfortable thermal conditions. Room with good thermal comfort can improve the quality related activities such as physical exercise. Activities related to sensory perception, eyes and ears like a house of worship, concert hall, cinema and other art performances will require appropriate thermal comfort situations. The temperature of the core of a human body, if it exceeds 37 degrees Celsius, can lead to stroke, heat exhaustion, or lead to death. Even in the human body in the room with a temperature above 40 degrees Celsius can increase body temperature. Increasing the body temperature accompanied by increased heart rate. So heart rate increased due to increased body temperature can lead to stroke. Besides the room temperature, heat can cause the body tired and dehydrated. The extreme conditions, and if the conditions are unfavorable body, it can cause death. Temperature regulation mechanisms. Thermoregulation is a mechanism by which mammals maintain body temperature with tightly controlled self-regulation independent of external temperatures. It is a type of homeostasis and a means of preserving a stable internal temperature in order to survive, and it is crucial to human life. Without thermoregulation, the human body would cease to function. Thermoregulation also plays an adaptive role in the body's response to infectious pathogens. Human beings have a normal core internal temperature of around 37 degrees Celsius. This is the optimal temperature at which the human body system functions. The human body has 4 different methods for maintaining core temperature: vaporization, radiation, convection, and conduction. Humans and other mammals and birds are endotherms, where they use thermoregulation to maintain a somewhat consistent internal body temperature even when the external environment changes. There are 3 main ways by which human temperature is affected and in response regulated. The body temperature is deeply influenced by climate temperature and its characteristics. As climate temperature is constantly changing and temperature homeostasis is a priority, the second mechanism by which body temperature is regulated takes place. The second way is by the autonomic nervous system, which reacts robustly to the thermal challenges by orchestrating a complex array of neural responses below the level of conscious awareness. The third is human behavioral temperature regulation, which responds to thermal sensory input by seeking warmth or coolness, slowing down or stepping up, then discontinuing or increasing exercise, and removing or adding clothing equipment, countering its current environmental temperature. Simultaneously, it also responsible for getting people into situations of cold or heat stress, some which can threaten life or health. Then the temperature of a body is regulated almost entirely by nerves, feedback mechanisms, and almost all these operate through temperature regulating centers located in the hypothalamus. For this mechanism to operate, there will also be temperature detectors to determine the body's temperature becomes either too high or too low. The body's core internal temperature has a narrow range and typically ranges 97 to 99 Fahrenheit with tight regulation. When the body's ability to thermoregulate becomes disrupted, it can result in overheating, hyperthermia, or being too cool, hypothermia. Either state can have deleterious effects on the various body systems, most significantly reduce blood flow leading to ischemia and multiple organ failure. Then thermoregulation has three mechanisms: afferent sensing, central control, afferent response. There are receptors for both heat and cold throughout the human body. Afferent sensing works through these receptors to determine if the body's core temperature is too cold or too hot. The hypothalamus is the central controller of thermoregulation. There is also an afferent behavior component that responds to fluctuations in body temperature. For example, if a person is feeling too warm, the body normal response is to remove an outer article of clothing. If a person is feeling too cold, then choose to wear more layers of clothing. Afferent responses also consist of autonomic responses by the body to protect itself from extreme changes in temperature, such as sweating, vasodilation, vasoconstriction, and shivering. Afferent sensing, central control, and afferent response. When too hot, vasodilation of skin, blood vessels, sweating, decrease in heat production. In too cold, skin vasoconstriction throughout the body, piloerection, increase in thermogenesis. Some temperature increase mechanism when the body is too hot, vasodilation of skin, blood vessels. In almost all areas of the body, the skin blood vessels become intensively dilated. This is caused by inhibition of the sympathetic centers in the posterior hypothalamus and cause vasoconstriction. Full vasoconstriction can increase the rate of heat transfer to the skin as much as 8-fold. Then sweating. There is a sharp increase in the rate of evaporative heat loss resulting from sweating when the body core temperature rises above the critical level. An additional 1 degree Celsius increase in body temperature causes enough sweating to remove 10 times the basal rate of body heat production. Then a decrease in heat production. The mechanism that causes excess heat production, such as shivering and chemical thermogenesis, are strongly inhibited. Then temperature increase in mechanism in the body is too cold when the body is too cold. So skin vasoconstriction throughout the body. This is caused by stimulation of the posterior hypothalamic sympathetic centers. Then piloerection. Piloerection means the hairs standing on it. So sympathetic stimulation causes the arrector pili muscles attached to the hair follicles to contract, which brings the hair to an upright stance. This is not important in human beings, but in lower organisms, upright projection of the hair allows them to enter a thick layer of insulated air next to the skin. So transfer of heat to the surroundings are greatly depressed. Then increase in thermogenesis or heat production. Heat production by the metabolic systems is increased by promoting shivering, sympathetic excitation of heat production, and thyroxine secretion. When cold fluids are ingested, the heat is released into the fluid and excreted out of the body as a sweat or urine. And the hypothalamus checks out current temperature and compares it with the normal temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius. If the temperature regulation has not happened, then multiple organs and body systems are affected when thermoregulation is impaired. The heart experiences increased work as it increases both the heart rate and cardiac output. The circulatory system can experience intravascular volume depletion. Then the brain can experience ischemia or edema. Then the gastrointestinal tract is vulnerable to hemorrhage and infection as the intestinal mucosa become increasingly permeable. The lungs become impaired if sustained hyperventilation, hyperemia, and pulmonary vasodilation lead to ARDS. Acute renal failure is an effect of intravascular volume depletion and impaired circulation. Liver cells suffer because of the fever, ischemia, and the cytokine increase in the intestinal tract. Various organs can become ischemic from microthrombi or DIC. And electrolytic abnormalities are likely, as well as hypoglycemia, metabolic acidosis, and respiratory alkalosis. Hypothermia is a disorder where body core temperature decreases below 35 degrees Celsius. It decelerates all physiologic roles including metabolic rate, mental awareness, nerve conduction, neuromuscular reaction times, and both the cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Then hyperthermia, it is an elevated core temperature of 40.5 degrees Celsius. It clinically causes sweating, flushing, tachycardia, fatigue, lightheadedness, headache, then paraesthesia, heart, muscle cramps, oliguria, nausea, then agitation, hypotension, confusion, delirium, seizures, and finally coma. The role of hypothalamus, adrenal, and thyroid glands. Cold hands, cold feet, even the tip of the nose being cold reveal clues about circulation and body temperature. Bundling up with sweaters and layers when others are comfortable is another indication that something may not be working properly. Impaired thyroid and adrenal function are the two most common endocrine function causes of low body temperature. A number of other disorders are linked with low body temperature, such as Addison's disease, blood sugar imbalances, mitochondrial disorders, infections, kidney failure, liver failure, asthma, and anemia. Hormone imbalances with low progesterone, estrogen dominance, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and insomnia. Temperature regulating centers, temperature regulation, thyroxine releasing hormone, TSH, thyroxine, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Hypothalamus and temperature regulation. The anterior hypothalamic prooptic area has been found to contain large number of heat sensitivity neurons as well as about 1/3 as many cold sensitive neurons. These neurons are believed to function as temperature sensors for controlling body temperature. The heat sensitive neurons increase their flinching rate to 10-fold in response to 10 degrees Celsius increased body temperature. The cold sensitive neurons, by contrast, increase their firing rate when the body temperature falls. When the prooptic area is heated, the skin all over the body immediately breaks out in a profuse sweat, whereas the skin body vessels over the entire body becomes greatly dilated. This is an immediate reaction to cause the body to lose heat, thereby helping to return the body temperature towards the normal level. In addition, any excess body heat production is inhibited. Therefore, it is clear that the hypothalamic preoptic area has the capability to serve as a thermostatic body temperature control center. Posterior hypothalamus integrates the central and peripheral temperature sensory signals. Even though many temperature sensory signals arise in peripheral receptors, the signals contribute to body temperature control mainly through hypothalamus. The area of hypothalamus is what that they stimulate is located bilaterally in the posterior hypothalamic region, approximately at the level of the mammillary bodies. The temperature sensory signals from the anterior hypothalamic preoptic area are also transmitted into its posterior hypothalamic area. There are signals from preoptic area and signals from elsewhere in the body are combined and integrated to control the heat producing and heat conserving reactions of the body. Hypothalamic stimulation and shivering. The preoptic and anterior hypothalamic nuclei of the hypothalamus, located in the dorsomedial portion of the posterior hypothalamus near the wall of the third ventricle, is an area called the primary motor center for shivering. This area is normally inhibited by signals from the heat center in the anterior hypothalamic preoptic area, but is excited by cold signals from the skin and spinal cord. The center becomes activated when the body temperature falls even a fraction of degree below a critical temperature level. It then transmits signals that cause shivering through bilateral tracts down the brain stem into the lateral columns of spinal cord and finally to the anterior motor neurons. The signals are non-rhythmical and do not cause the actual muscle shaking. Instead, they increase the tone of the skeletal muscle throughout the body by facilitating the activity of the anterior motor neurons. When the tone rises above a certain critical level, shivering begins. This probably results from chemical oscillation of the muscle spindle structure reflex mechanism. During maximum shivering, body heat production can rise to 4 to 5 times normal. Then adrenal gland and thermal regulation. Sympathetic chemical excitation of heat production. An increase in either sympathetic stimulation or circulating norepinephrine and epinephrine in the body can cause an immediate increase in the rate of cellular metabolism. This effect is called chemical thermogenesis, a non-shivering thermogenesis. It results in, at least partially, from the ability of norepinephrine and epinephrine to uncouple oxidative phosphorylation, which means that excessive foodstuffs are oxidized and thereby release energy in the form of heat, but do not cause ATP to be formed. Adrenal fatigue and hormonal dysregulation from brain stress. Adrenal stress, adrenal fatigue, and Addison's disease all can impact body temperature regulation. Adrenal fatigue or distress can lead to imbalanced hormone levels, including either low or high cortisol or low or high DHEA, depending on how the body has adapted to acute and chronic stress. In adrenal stress, the glands produce relatively normal levels of hormones but are under pressure and have an altered pattern of output. Adrenal function returns back to homeostasis once the stress is removed and rest has occurred. Imbalance of these adrenal hormones can cause low body temperature and other stress-related symptoms. Low levels of serotonin and dopamine also affect body temperature regulation. Both neurotransmitters are regulated for thyroid hormone production. Chronic stress depletes serotonin and dopamine. Serotonin controls body heat production because it functions as a signaling molecule in fat tissue and affects blood sugar regulation. Serotonin is needed by the hypothalamus and pituitary glands to signal TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone production. Low serotonin can lead to low TSH and low blood temperature, but the thyroid gland is not the direct cause. Coenzyme methylated forms of beta, B vitamins, magnesium ion, and SAMe, trimethylglycerin, etc. are nutritionally required for serotonin production. Low dopamine levels in the brain can also cause low TSH production, which leads to low body temperature, poor thyroid function, and hypothyroidism. Adrenal fatigue is also linked with low dopamine levels. Next, thyroid gland and thermal regulation. Increased thyroxine output as a long-term cause of increased heat production. Cooling the anterior hypothalamic preoptic area also increases production of neurosecretory hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, by the hypothalamus. This hormone is carried by way of hypothalamic portal veins to the anterior pituitary gland, where it stimulates secretion of thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone in turn stimulates increased output of thyroxine by the thyroid gland. So the increased thyroxine activity is uncoupling protein and increase the rate of cellular metabolism throughout the body, which is yet another mechanism of chemical thermogenesis. This increase in metabolism does not occur immediately, but requires several weeks exposure to cold to make the thyroid gland hypertrophy and reach its new level of thyroxine secretion. Exposure of animals to extreme cold for several weeks can cause their thyroid glands to increase in size 20 to 40%. However, human beings seldom allow themselves to be exposed to the same degree of cold as that to animals are often subjected. Therefore, we still do not know quantitatively how important the thyroid mechanism of adaptation to cold in the human being. Isolated measurements have shown that military personnel residing for several months in the Arctic develop increased metabolic rates. Some Eskimos also have abnormally high basal metabolic rates. Further, the continuous simultaneous stimulatory effect of cold on thyroid gland may explain the much higher incidence of toxic thyroid goitis in people who live in cold climates than in those who live in warm climates. Hypothyroidism is well-known cause for low body temperature and cold intolerance. Then appropriate medical and nutritional management is essential to minimize the impact. Next, thermal receptors and their stimulation. Human beings perceive various grades of thermal sensation. 3 types of receptors: cold receptors, warmth receptors, pain receptors. At extreme temperature, pain receptors are also stimulated when there is burning hot or freezing cold. The cold and warmth receptors are located immediately under the skin at discrete separate spots. There are 3 to 10 times saving many cold spots as warmth spots. The number in different areas of body varies from 15 to 25 cold spots per square centimeter in the lips to 3 to 5 cold spots per square centimeter in the finger to less than 1 cold spots per square centimeter in some broad surface areas of the trunk. Sense organs of the skin. We know many sense organs are there, like thermoreceptors, Meissner's corpuscles, senses touch, nociceptors like senses pain, and Purcinian corpuscle senses pressure. Hypodermis, dermis, layers. These are layers: epidermis, dermis, hypodermis, which sense various sensations like thermoreceptors, heat. Mesten's corpuscle senses, then senses pain, nociceptors. Here in the top layer, we could see the stimuli we are providing. First one is heat, some sort of heat. Second one is a mechanical stimuli. Mechanical stimuli in the sense a feather is there, so just touching our skin. Then nociceptors, we are inflicting pain in that region of the skin, like applying a needle into that portion. So that will definitely cause pain. So nociceptor will detect that pain. Then on other region, touch is also there. So sense pressure. Pressure will be applied. Pressure is applied in that region. So that would lead to activation of Purcinian corpuscles. Then thermal receptors. These are nerve endings present in dermis. From warmth receptors, impulses are carried by C fibers 0.4 to 2 per second. From cold receptors, impulses are carried mainly by A delta fibers and some C fibers. Stimulation, thermal receptors, sensations of cold, cool, indifferent, warm, and hot. The response of four types of nerve fibers: a pain fiber stimulated by cold, a cold fiber, a warmth fiber, a pain fiber stimulated by heat. Note especially that these fibers respond differently at different levels of temperature. In the very cold region, only the cold pain fiber are stimulated. If the skin becomes even colder so that it nearly freezes or actually does freeze, these fibers cannot stimulate. As temperature rises to plus 10 degree to 15 degrees Celsius, the cold pain impulse ceases, but the cold receptors begin to be stimulated, reaching peak stimulation at about 24 degrees Celsius and fading out slightly above 40 degrees Celsius. About 30 degrees Celsius, the warmth receptors begin to be stimulated, but this also fade out at about 49 degrees Celsius. Finally, at around 45 degrees Celsius, the heat pain fiber begin to be stimulated by heat. Paradoxically, some of the cold fibers begin to be stimulated again, possibly because of damage to the cold ending caused by excessive heat. A person determines the different gradations of thermal sensations by the relative degree of stimulation of the different type of endings. When intense enough may give almost the same quality of sensation. Freezing cold and burning hot sensation feel almost alike. Freezing cold, cold pain, cold in different warm, hot, burning hot regions. Then adaptation of thermal receptors. Stimulating effects of rising and falling temperature. When a cold receptor is suddenly subject to an abrupt fall in temperature, it becomes strongly stimulated at first, but stimulation fades rapidly during the first few seconds and progressively more slowly during the next 30 minutes or more. This is evident that thermal sensors respond to steady states of temperature. This means that when the temperature of skin is actively falling, a person feels much colder than when the temperature remains cold at the same level. Conversely, if the temperature is actively rising. What was it? This is evident that thermal sensors respond to steady states of temperature. This means that when the temperature of skin is actively falling, a person feels much colder than when the temperature remains cold at the same level. Conversely, if the temperature is actively rising. Then mechanisms of stimulation of thermal receptors. Cold and warmth receptors are stimulated by changes in their metabolic rates, and as this changes result from the fact that temperature after the rates of intracellular chemical reactions more than 2 or reach 10 more degrees Celsius. Spatial summation of thermal sensation. The number of cold or warm endings in any surface area of a body is slight. It is different to judge gradations of temperature when small skin are stimulated. When a large skin are stimulated all at once, the thermal signals from the entire area summate. For instance, rapid changes in temperature are as little as 0.01 degrees Celsius can be detected if this change affects the entire surface of the body simultaneously. Conversely, temperature changes 100 times as great often will not be detected when affecting skin areas only square centimeter in size. Then transmission of thermal signals in the nerve system. On the entering spinal cord, the signal travels for a few segments upward or downward on the tract of insular and then terminate mainly in termini first, second, and third of the dorsal horns of the same as for pain. After a small amount of processing by one or more cold neurons, the signals enter long ascending terminal fibers that cross to the opposite anterior-lateral sensory tract and terminate in both the reticulate areas of the brainstem, the ventrobasal complex of the thalamus. A few thermal signals are also relayed to the cerebral somatic sensory cortex from the ventral basal complex. Occasionally, a neuron in cortical somatic sensory area has been found by microelectrode studies to be directly responsive to either cold or warmth stimuli on a specific area of the skin. However, removal of entire cortical post-central gyrus in the human being reduced but does not abolish the ability to distinguish gradations of temperature.